Welcome to 10th or Tuesday, episode 2. My name is Michael Boldin, recording live in Los Angeles with
Michael Maharrey, recording live in L.A., the Lexington area.
Nice. Well, before we actually get... there's three things that I want to cover in this week's episode. One, a quick thank you to someone who gave us the idea for the show. I think you know who that's going to be. Two, there's an article that we published just over the weekend, or the long weekend, talking about some issues regarding the right to keep and bear arms that I think is extremely important. And then we got some interesting feedback, Mike, on our discussion and your article about how the states need to take action to finish off Obamacare. And that's if we have time. I mean, maybe we'll only get to one of these. And if we have time, you just mentioned to me before we started here some privacy-related issues that we can cover. So just to get rolling, first of all, a quick thanks to Tom Woods over at tomwoods.com, who gave us the idea for 10th or Tuesday. I was the first guest on his podcast. I don't know, maybe it was 2 years ago. Do you know how many shows Tom has done?
He's like on 700, and he's a bunch. Yeah.
Insane. Well, Tom has been an incredible supporter of us here at 10th Amendment Center, so the quick shout out to Tom to thank him for the awesome idea for 10th or Tuesday, which we're now doing here every week. But moving forward, so this article from TJ Martinell, the reason that I mentioned or suggested to him that he write it is because we're often hearing from people this kind of phrase that basically says, Mike, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, which I agree is a horrible thing, if she gets elected, the Second Amendment is over. Or it's in danger. And
it needs to be saved.
We got to save the Second Amendment, protect the Second Amendment with different Supreme Court justices, or maybe Trump's policies, or Gary Johnson, or whatever it may be. And I think what everyone is seeming to ignore is the fact that the Second Amendment has actually been gone for a long time. If we're talking about the idea that the federal government has zero authority to have any gun control measures at all, no matter what, then the status quo actually sucks too.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote an article. I just thought of this. It's been probably 2 or 3 years ago about how the conservatism is this sliding scale, and what we were conserving 20 years ago, that gets obliterated, and so now we're conserving something that is 20 years ahead, but now that's the thing we're conserving. And that's the way the Second Amendment is. We're talking about saving it or preserving it or protecting it, and we've slidden so far away from the original intent in the Second Amendment. We're basically conserving something that I don't even know that exists anymore. So we really have to look at not only conserving, and we definitely do need to protect the further encroachments of the federal power violating the right to keep and bear arms, but we also need to think about rolling it back and actually restoring what the Second Amendment was intended to be in the first place.
And certainly we approach this in a couple of different ways. One, philosophically, there should be no gun control measures at all from these people. But two, strategically, and we do recognize that you're not going to overturn all of this stuff. And if you read TJ's article, and Mike, as you're putting together the blog for this so we can share it to people after the fact, make sure you get a link to that. This article, The Second is Not in Force, an overview of federal gun control measures already on the books. And TJ goes back to 1934, and it may actually even go further back from that. But the National Firearms Act, which created, similar to Obamacare, they used taxes, and drug prohibition, they used taxation as a way to restrict the right to keep and bear arms. And I think shall not be infringed is pretty straightforward. Infringe is to restrict, cut back, make it more difficult does not mean that you're no longer, just because it's more difficult doesn't mean it's okay. None of these things are okay. And just keeping the status quo is also bad. So keeping in mind strategically, Mike, obviously we're not going to take this all down at the same time, but chipping away may be a good strategy, and that's something you covered in your recent ebook, Thomas Jefferson's Letters, Volume 1.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's like we said, this is an educational piece more than anything to make people aware. Hey, what we have now is not good, and we need to be aware of that so that we're not accepting these federal overreaches as the norm. But strategically, I think you're right. It takes incremental steps, and a good first step is like what they did out in Idaho when they did agreed that they would not enforce or participate in the enforcement of any future federal gun control. That's a great first step. And then you can build on that in the future, and we can look at rolling back maybe one or two of these in place overreaches until eventually we can roll it all the way back until we have exactly what we're supposed to be have, shall not infringe.
Yeah, that's zero gun control measures. And Scott Landreth, who's part of our campaign, single issue campaign leadership, he heads up our shallnot.org division, we can call it, and our efforts to protect the Second Amendment on a state and local level. He's been reaching out to legislators this week and getting some positive response. I think people recognize that, well, okay, we can say, yeah, if Hillary Clinton's in, the strategy that all these major organizations, from NRA to many others, of, okay, let's get the federal government through the courts to protect the right to keep and bear arms, is actually not just in shambles, it's become extremely dangerous. And if we don't change course to this, hey, we're not going to participate, we're going to take actions to resist, reject, block, nullify, whatever you want to call it, all these federal gun control measures, it's pretty much doomed going forward with that same strategy. So again, the article, the second is not in force. I'm reading it and I'm having trouble. An overview of federal gun control already on the books. And Mike, moving forward, I want to talk about, we had a quick discussion on dealing with Obamacare and your article that we published last week on how states can finish pulling the rug out from underneath Obamacare. And we got this interesting response from someone on Twitter. I'll keep their name, we'll keep them private. And they basically said, hey, you don't need to nullify Obamacare. All you need to do is elect Donald Trump and it's going to be gone. Well, I mean, let's say that Trump's plan to get rid of Obamacare, he calls it repeal and replace, which I'm not a big fan of. I think repeal and nothing is the way to go. And maybe he has some very good parts of that plan. Let's say it's 100% fantastic. Well, very specifically, Patrick Henry, and we did a video on this just recently as well, said, hey, if you're relying on a federal politician or a person or a group of people in Washington, D.C. to protect your liberty or do the right thing, there is no society in history, as Henry put it, that did not see a subsequent loss of liberty. We're not supposed to be waiting for the federal government to fix the problems created by the federal government, Mike, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people forget that the president's not a dictator, although I'm not sure that there's some people that wouldn't like that.
Right.
But, Donald Trump can't get elected and wave a magic wand and suddenly make Obamacare disappear. He has to deal with the Congress. And we've seen Congress's plans. I mean, I've written a couple of articles on the Republican plan, this whole repeal and replace.
Yeah,
and
Paul
basically
Ryan, right?
It's a Republican version of Obamacare. It's the same federal overreach. Okay, maybe it does some better things, but they're equally unconstitutional, and you're going to have the same consequences from this massive federal control over healthcare that you have now. So the strategy, in my view, is let it collapse, use state effort to collapse it, and then at the state level, begin building healthcare systems at the state and local level,
right.
and let these systems compete with each other, and let's find something that works within the market and not have this top-down dictatorial, Donald Trump's going to – I don't want Donald Trump healthcare any more than I want Obamacare, and I don't think anybody else really does either.
I would also add the caveat that let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Donald Trump's healthcare plan, or lack of, or whatever it may be called, was perfect constitutionally.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. The fact is that an unconstitutional act is on the books, whatever John Roberts happens to say about it. It's on the books today. And you're not supposed to sit around and wait 2 or 4 or 6 years for a federal politician to propose something that goes through Congress, that gets stuck in committee, that maybe gets watered down, that maybe gets to his desk, and then maybe has a rider attached to it, and then maybe he has to sign it or doesn't. According to Thomas Jefferson, we're talking about Principles of 98. The words he used, Mike, you know as well as I do, I'm sure many of our viewers here do too, whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. Not after we try a few other things, or we wait on some dude to come in on a white horse to fix it and then maybe doesn't get it done. Whensoever means right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Madison used similar language in the Virginia resolutions. He talks about dangerous, palpable violations of the Constitution, and that's clearly what we have here. And we need to take action. And we all know that these things, they tend to get rooted deeper and deeper the longer that they're
Right.
sitting festered.
Social Security.
Yeah, exactly. Medicare.
I paid
Medicaid.
into that. I deserve, it's okay. Or the Postal Service, something. I don't know. All these things that they do that are really just a mess. They become part of the daily life, and then people don't want to get rid of them. I've seen pictures from Tea Party rallies where people are holding up signs saying, keep hands off my Medicaid.
Right. Yeah. It's like I had an infection in my finger a couple of weeks ago, and it started getting red and putting streaks up my finger. I didn't think, well, I'll wait a few months and see if it goes away by itself, or, no, I went to the doctor. I took aggressive action to get rid of the infection in my finger, and Obamacare is an infection in the United States. It's awful from an economic standpoint. It's awful from a constitutional standpoint, and we need to do everything within our power. And the states have the power at their fingertips. Why not use it? Why hope that some politician gets elected and then does the right thing?
Yeah, so the moral of the story here is whensoever, just like Thomas Jefferson said, whensoever, anytime the federal government overreaches, you're supposed to have a response on a state, local, or individual level. We're way over. We're getting close. I don't know. I can't see the timer. We're around the 10-minute mark, so I guess we got to wrap it up. I do want you to mention, Mike, I know you have an ebook that you're publishing, or you just published today, maybe over at michaelmaharrey.com. Give us a quick overview of that, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit more next week.
Yeah, it's called The Power of No, and it's just a very quick 17-page primer on state nullification. Quick overview of the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, a quick overview of Madison's blueprint, and then one specific example, practically how we've used nullification today, specifically in the realm of marijuana. So it's a short read. It's kind of an introduction to the subject, and you can download it for free at michaelmaharrey.com. And you'll see right on the front page, it says free ebook, and it really is free.
Awesome. I haven't read it yet, so I'm excited to check it out. And of course, thank you all for watching. If you support what we're doing here between the ebooks, this kind of a conversation, the model legislation that we make available at 10thamendmentcenter.com/legislation, make sure you join us as a member over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Once again, thanks for watching 10th or Tuesday. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.